What are you watching?
Thank you, and welcome back to the show. Before I introduce our distinguished first guest, I have to read this. Hi, folks. Let me take the time to let you all know how much I love my bitches. First of all, I'd like to thank my bottom bitch, Lakeisha Jones. Man, her feet are the smoothest and silkiest feet I've ever sucked on. But my second favorite bitch is this nappy-headed hoe I call Bluegrass. She's got the smallest toes, but for some reason that turns me on the most. And now, my final bitch, Harriet Kingsley. I keep her locked in my room and feed her slop 3 times a day. But trust me, she loves it. Well, that's just all I wanted to tell you guys. Let's see what Brian Redban has to say. I apologize to Paul Mooney and the memory of Richard Pryor for that rendition. You know, it is a privilege to bring to the stage our first guest. This guy, he's a pillar of the podcast empire that is just burgeoning in show business right now, the hottest thing in the world. And he's been called the future of funny by Culture Magazine. You've seen him on the Joe Rogan Experience, well, I'll be talking to him about that, the Church of What's Happening Now, the Ice House Chronicles, and now on the incredibly popular Kill Tony. Give it up for Brian Redban, ladies and gentlemen. Nice to have you here, buddy.
Thank you.
Nice, really nice to have you here. You know, you've spent the entire past decade writing, producing, directing, getting these podcasts going. How did that get rolling for you?
You know, I started off in doing like video editing and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And if you know anything about video editing, it's time consuming, it's boring. You're just doing it for hours and hours. And when podcasts kind of started, I was like, you know what? That seems a lot easier. It's audio, it's not video, and you usually don't edit it. You usually just interview somebody. So I was working for Rogan, and I was like trying to get him to start doing podcasts because I didn't want to edit video all night.
Yeah.
And we just happened to get started at the right time, you know, a little before a lot of most people, and it hit off.
Now you co-hosted the Joe Rogan Experience.
Yeah. We both co-created it.
Co-created
with him,
it.
And I'm on like the first 500 episodes or so, and then we hired Jamie, who's now he took over the place that I used to do, the engineer. And it's been great.
So you're still attached to it business-wise then?
Business-wise, yeah. I still work for Joe. But now it's more like, I guess I would be considered like executive producer now, where you don't do anything.
Exactly.
I don't know.
well, who was it we had on? Who's on his 5th season of ABC, the sitcom, The Goldbergs and. Brian Callen was on this show, and he said, this is interesting to me, that he makes more money off his podcast now than he does off his ABC salary.
No, I agree.
In his 5th year on network.
Oh, I believe it.
That's interesting.
If you think of it this way, back in the day, like the Johnny Carsons and stuff like that, you can say that was a podcast before podcast.
You could, yeah.
It was interviewing somebody, but you had multiple guests.
Right.
Nowadays, the late night shows, they're not getting those kind of numbers. Where
not at all.
Joe gets, I think Joe had Bernie Sanders on today.
Yeah.
So it's like, I'm sure he's getting millions and millions and millions.
Yeah, Mark Maron had Barack Obama.
Yeah. Osama.
There's a slip.
That was a creepy episode.
He killed.
Yeah, he did. Stinky episode. But no, so I think, when it comes to advertisers, they look at, numbers. They want people, they're Coca-Cola wants as many people. That's why they pay for a spot. So nowadays, like Conan O'Brien or whatever, like they're not getting the same numbers as Joe Rogan. So Joe Rogan's probably getting, I can't say for sure because I don't deal with any of that, but he's probably getting the same kind of numbers as a regular commercial
Well,
spot.
in the morning, there's a 1-minute segment on one of the radio shows I listen to, and they list the top 5 podcasts. It's like a daily rating thing now.
Yeah.
You know, and Joe's always up there.
Yeah, he's always up at the top now. It's great.
So how's Kill Tony coming along?
Kill Tony's blowing up. That's another one.
How did that start?
I used to do a show here every Monday called The Secret Show, and it was an interview kind of based show. It was me and Jason Tebow, and we usually
He's great.
Yeah,
we
he's
had
great.
him on last week. Oh.
And we usually had a couple guests, like we had like Dead Mouse on, it got pretty decent. But the problem was, you know, for an interview show like a live podcast, it's really hard to make it interesting because it's just kind of an interview that you have an audience with. So after about like 30 episodes or so, I wasn't feeling it anymore. And then Tony was like, I want a podcast. And I was I was like, you know what, Tony, let's do it. Let's make a podcast together. I have this Monday spot at the Comedy Store, which, you know, it's gold.
Yeah.
And we took a lot of pieces from the old show, The Secret Show. Like we had a different artist every week that would draw the episode, you know, at the end of it.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, and so we took a lot of little pieces from that show, mixed it into this new concept that Tony had an idea. What the idea is, Mondays are really famous here because there's open mic night, you know,
Right.
it's apocalypse, and so we decided, you know, wouldn't it be great to have a second open mic since all the new comics are already going to be here?
Yeah.
But this time, let's do it on a show where they put their name in a bucket. We pull out names randomly. They get to do 1 minute. Only 1 minute, which is like the hardest thing to do ever.
Right.
And we'll have a couple guests, and then we'll critique them, or we'll help them out, you know, if they're a new comic, or we'll just roast them. And every week we kind of added new elements to it. Like we had a guy that dressed up as an Iron Man costume from like Hollywood Boulevard, like you know, like he had like the big costume. He was our head of security. He was kind of like the co-host, or not the co-host, like the band of the show.
Yeah.
And then we replaced him with, you know, we just changed that. Now it's a full band with Jeremiah Watkins and Joel Jimenez and Chroma Chris, and they dress up as characters every week, you know, so it's kind of fun.
They actually play music.
Yeah, and they play music, and they play characters every week. Like it's just a lot of fun. It's a very chaotic.
Are they characters
show.
you interview on the show?
Not really, but they interact in the characters. Like
Okay.
we never know what they're going to be. Like so they'll come out. Like the other week, they were a bunch of fishermen, you know, and so they won't break the character, or try not to break the character. So like we have to interact with them as if they were fishermen, you know, and stuff like that. So it adds there's so many layers to the show. There's so many things. Yeah, we've been doing it over 6 years now, and in the last, I'd say, 1.5 years, 2 years, it's exploded. Where we just did the Gramercy Theater in New York, which was our biggest show, just thousands of people. Everywhere we go, it's been selling out now.
Yeah.
Every Monday, I mean, Monday's always known to be a hard night for comedy clubs,
Right.
you know, and we started off in the belly room, you know, like 80, 100 people or something like that. Now, every Monday, we're almost selling out the main rooms.
And it's with customers, not just comedians.
Yeah, customers. Yeah. We got to the point where we used to let the comedians sit in there.
Yeah.
And now we can't even fit so we have to only pick like 30 people out of the bucket, you know, pre-select 30
Was it
people.
chaotic in New York as well?
Oh, it's more chaotic when we're on the road. Yeah, and it's very interesting going to every city and seeing the style of comics and the material they talk about. You know,
What did you learn?
People out there, there's a lot of people that want to be comedians, and there's a lot of, you know, it's pretty interesting how energetic everybody
Should they
is.
want to be comedians?
I mean, there's a lot of competition right now. That's for sure. I mean,
Well, but when I started, and Greg Hilbers is here, when we started, you had to risk your youth and move to either LA or New York in order to bet on your future, and it threw you into, I've got to do this. It was kill or die, literally. And so now everybody has a little comfort station of their local comedy club where they can creep their way along, get comfortable there, develop bad habits there, and wind up here 15 years later with a road act.
Right, yeah. Yeah, I moved out here from Ohio, and when I lived in Ohio, I did it for, I don't know, like 2 years. And then moving out here, I pretty much just had to start over because, you know, the open mics of Columbus, Ohio is completely different than
You don't open with a Buckeye joke on the Sunset Strip.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's exactly half my jokes were about the local car dealer that got caught with a dildo in his butt. So,
that happened in Vegas too.
Yeah. Well, maybe it's just, you know, maybe that happens all over the place. You know? But they know it's so funny. Our local car dealer, Fred Reichert, he got pulled over with a prostitute and a bunch of cocaine, and it was like I forget, like a Ferrari. He got pulled over because he was just like super rich, and so he donated that Ferrari to the police station to kind of keep it under the cover. And now you walk into the Columbus Police Department, and there's this like 1990s Ferrari just sitting there. You're like, why is this Ferrari in the middle of the police station? And that's the one he donated, and they covered it up pretty well for him.
Hooker, cocaine?
Hooker, cocaine, and a couple years later, he had to go to the hospital because he had something in his butt.
You know, in West Hollywood, he would have been arrested for the noise ordinance.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah, but so that was the kind of jokes that I did, you know. So when I came out here, I couldn't talk about any of it, so I had to start over pretty much from scratch.
Well, one thing I'm listening to you makes me wonder, how has, or if it has, your busyness at producing all this empire you're developing, how has it affected your stand-up?
Oh, it has. It definitely has. I used to go up a lot. I used to focus mostly on road shows, like comedy shows. I'm the kind of guy that, you know, I used to go on the road with like Tiffany Haddish and Dean Del Rey and Tony. And I would be the guy calling all these comedy clubs because I don't have a manager. So I would like make deals with all these clubs, like, hey, what's your Tuesdays looking? No, you don't have anyone? Can I come in there? And then, and that was a lot of work. That's booking all those things, making deals, booking hotels, booking flights, and all that stuff. That's a full-time job on its own. So now we've been touring so much with Kill Tony that I haven't had even time to even do that, you know. But luckily. A lot of these shows we go on the road, we do stand-up comedy attached to it. So we'll do like a Kill Tony followed by a comedy show or vice versa.
So you'll do stand-up, Tony will do stand-up.
Yeah.
Well, Culture Magazine named you the comedy of the future. How'd you get that handle?
I have no idea. That's one of those like, is that even a magazine type interviews? Like,
you did have a publicist at one time.
No, I didn't. No, that was somebody like, can I interview you? And I'm like, all right, sure. And then I didn't even know what that magazine was, and he was basing it off, you know, when I started Death Squad, which is a podcast network. After I started Joe Rogan's, helped him start that, I started helping all my friends out. Like I helped start Ari Shaffir's podcast, Tom Segura and Chris Pizitsky, Joey Diaz, like all those podcasts I helped start. And so
do you have an interest in their shows now?
What's that?
A financial interest in their shows?
No. Those, I was dumb at the time. I was learn from my mistakes. No, because how I looked at it, I was just helping my friends. It wasn't.
That's how we're going to stay.
Yeah, it wasn't for the money. But I tell you what, when I started Kill Tony, that was when it changed. I go, hey, look, if I'm going to do this, we are 50-50, 100%. And so that was the first time I did it, and that's why I still do it. Because a lot of the other places they got to, like, you know, your mom's house, after like, I think 50 episodes, Tom's like, well, I might go do this at my own house, you know, and I'm like, all right, see you later. But now I was like, all right, wait, I just helped.
I was going to get to that.
So now you know.
Well, that is really interesting. Well, when you're on stage now, let's go light. What do you like to talk about on stage?
You know, my comedy is a lot different than other people. My influences were always a little on the dirtier side. The Joe Rogan, the Doug Stanhope was a huge. So I talk a little dirty.
This is the free speech zone.
A little dirty, but a lot of stuff about ex-girlfriends.
Oh, go ahead. And, tell us about it.
You know what? I don't know if I ever told you this story. When I was in Columbus, the last time I did stand-up in Columbus, Ohio, was the day Bob Hope died. Yeah. And out there was only one mic, and there was like 100 comics.
That's about 15 years ago.
Yeah. And it took a while to get on stage. So I think it took usually about a month and a half every week going to the comedy club until you finally got a 3-minute spot. Yeah. So I finally got up. It was the day Bob Hope died. And I was like, you know what? I thought of this really fucked up Bob Hope joke. I want to do it, but I don't know. He just died today. And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to do it. So I go out, and the comedy club was, they had a hard time getting people to go to their open mics. So across the street, there was a retirement home.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
And so they would give free
Fans
tickets.
of Bob for
Yeah,
75
one of the
years.
biggest fans ever. I didn't think about this part.
Kind
So,
of like your deal with Joe Rogan.
yeah. So they gave free tickets to all these. So I come out and I go, holy shit, this whole audience is older people. Do I still do this joke? And I did. And it was a really bad idea. And I quit comedy after that for like 2 years.
What was the joke? What was the joke? What was the joke?
Well, you got to know the time period. It was that Bob Hope died. We were in war.
In Iraq.
In Iraq. And I was like, guys, did you hear? Bob Hope died. And immediately the whole audience was like, oh. I'm like, shit, here we go. And I was like, do you think they flew out his body to Iraq to entertain all the dead troops? Booze, hissing. People are getting mad. People talk to the manager.
Oh, that's brilliant. That's like,
And this is Columbus, Ohio. This isn't the Comedy Store when it might have worked. This was, I stopped after that. I was like, you know what? I just spent the last month and a half to get 3 minutes. Why am I doing this to myself?
Oh.
And then when I moved back out here, Joe Rogan goes, dude, you need to start doing comedy again. And so he started just throwing me in front of like sold out like arenas and stuff like that.
well, the story you just reminded me of back when President John F. Kennedy was in office. It was the time of the great album comedians. Okay, the album comedians, and all the older comedians that you would think of, they had great albums, right? And there were sketch albums as well. And there was this comedian named Von Meter. Did you ever hear of him? He had a perfect Jack Kennedy impression. And he had a huge, huge following, 10 million selling album called The First Family. And it was just hilarious. The Kennedy family loved it. It was just wonderful. And so he gets assassinated in Dallas. And that night, Lenny Bruce goes on stage at Carnegie Hall. And his opening line is, poor Von Meter. Comedy hits it.
That's great.
That's the guts you showed with Bob Hope.
Yeah.
But I don't know, for those of you who don't, Bob was from Ohio.
Yeah,
right?
he was. And what's crazy about this, I feel like I've been haunted by Bob Hope. I live in Burbank off Bob Hope Road. My airport is the Bob Hope Airport. Like, I don't know what's going on.
Oh my God, this is fantastic. All right, give it up for Brian Redban, ladies and gentlemen. You were fantastic. I really enjoyed this, Brian. Fantastic. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back, ladies and gentlemen. We'll be right back with Robin Tran. Now let's get a picture taken.